Good afternoon, everyone. This is Gene. I'm back with another video. It's a little after 1 p.m. here in New York City. I know that in other parts of the world it might be the morning or the evening or the afternoon or in the middle of the night, early morning. So wherever you are and whatever time and I guess part of the day it is, I hope you're well. So today's video is going to be a little bit different. I was actually listening to a Melanie Mack video. For those who are not familiar with Melanie, she covers video games and whatnot, and in particular, she's a big Tomb Raider fan. Right? She's a big Lara Croft fan, and in particular is a fan of the classic 1990s era Lara Croft. Now, I was listening to a video from her that was about 6 months ago, right? So about January, February, right? In fact, let's see. It says that this video that I was listening to was published on January 31st, right? So end of January, literally before the beginning of February. So she was talking about, the title of the video is New Tomb Raider Game Info Leaked, Here We Go Again. And in the video, she talks about how different the 1990s version of Lara Croft and how the reboot version of her, how different they are. Now, she acknowledges that she likes both games and she likes both versions, but the one that's closest to her heart is the 1990s one. And I would agree with her there. Tomb Raider is one of those things where, as a game, I don't find it terribly interesting because I'm just not into that type of gameplay. It's like Sonic 2 in a way for me. I respect it for the artistic element, right? The beautiful colors, the amazing soundtrack, in particular for Sonic 2. But as a video game, given that it's a platformer, not my thing, right? But I would never say that Sonic 2 is a bad game, and I would never say that at least the original one or two Tomb Raider games are bad, even if as for gameplay, it's not necessarily to my liking. But I always liked the character of Lara Croft because of how powerful um, she was. And for me, it wasn't a gender thing. It was just, oh, this really cool female character. Or rather, this really cool character, who just happens to be a female. Now, granted, when Tomb Raider first came out, I think it was 1995 or 1996, so I would have been around like 10, 11 years old. And when the series really, at least in my experience, when the series really took off, was like Tomb Raider 2, so that was probably 1 or 2 years later, so I would have been entering my teenage years, and I remember being at school because I collected GamePro at the time, and every month, boys would come over, sit next to me at lunch, wanting to read the magazine, wanting to borrow the magazine, see if there's anything new about Tomb Raider in it, and of course, especially back then, if you were a teenager at that time, or a little older or a little younger, you might remember the Tomb Raider nude code and all this other stuff. And of course, guys are always asking me as if I would know or care, right? And I remember the controversy over Lara's appearance, in particular the girls, right, back then also. But as a character, I found her likable. I just wasn't terribly interested in the games because of the gameplay, but as a character, I thought she was really cool. And of course, being older now, 20 years on, and having done more research, I have more information about the games. Lara was designed, 90s Lara was very much a 1990s action hero, right? As Leanna Kay often says, she was mad, bad, dangerous to know. She was a bionic hero. Even some of the people behind her character design, right, gave interviews back then explaining that her look wasn't necessarily meant to be sexualized. She was marketed in a very sexually appealing manner, but the character herself was not necessarily meant to be a sex bot. She was just meant to be very, cool, powerful, a badass, stuff um, like that. But what Melanie was talking about, and I firmly agree, was how different these interpretations, the original classic one and this newer reboot one, were, and how, for example, Lara in the original version, came from this rich English family that disowned her because she didn't want to go through with an arranged marriage. She wanted to live her own life, live it on her terms, right? Go on adventures, get in trouble, all this stuff. whereas the new version of her, is about following in her dad's footsteps and all this other stuff, right? And Melanie mentions in the video about the loss of agency from original Lara to new Lara. Now, the reason why I bring all this up is because of the fact that it made me think about how there's been this gaslighting over the past several years, probably since the height of Gamergate, right? Back when Tropes versus Women was active and around, and Anita Sarkeesian was, enemy number one among many gamers and whatnot, and how there's been this gaslighting, probably even prior to that, but at least from my viewpoint, from then on. So I would say like 2014, 2015, the whole SJW versus anti-SJW thing to now. So about maybe 6 years, 5, 6 years, maybe between 7 and 5 years, right? Or 5 to 7 years is probably a better way to say it, where we've been having this war, right? Even though Gamergate is officially over, right? Whenever game devs or studios or in particular games journalism wants to, sort of stick it to gamers, especially if gamers are vocally upset about something, they'll bring up Gamergate and how, if you disagree with the popular accepted narrative, that you must be a sexist troll, you must be a presumed straight male gamer, as Anita would say. Even if you are, say, like me, who is not male and not white. I am straight, though, so they have me there. But I'm not a man, and I'm not white, as you can obviously see. This is not makeup, this is natural, and a result of a lot of chocolate. Always have mocha in the morning. But anyway, it just, Melanie's video, which I think is very good. I like her content. Just reminded me of this gaslighting that we've been dealing with as gamers, especially if you are vocally opposed to what goes on in video games or what certain video games bring to the table. Right, the most recent controversy, of course, is The Last of Us 2, with the character of Abby and her very unrealistic, to say the least, appearance, right? And of course, Druckmann and people who support him and people who support EA have insulted gamers who bring up the fact that, hey, we have no problem with Abby being fit. We have a problem with her, A, murdering the player character from the last game, and B, her being as yoked as she is, considering that she's living in a survival horror world, right, where she's living on not even protein bars, old candy bars and burritos, right? Anybody who's familiar with fitness, athletics, sports, knows that you don't get a body like Abby's overnight, and you can't maintain it unless you have optimal circumstances, right? Eat enough, sleep enough, work out enough for what's what I'm looking for an extended amount of time, for at least, I would say, at least 3 years, probably more 5 years, but at least 3 years time, right? If you're trying to get to Abby's size. Now, of course, there are some who say, well, Abby's body is based off of a real life athlete. Yes, and I respect that, but that real life athlete would not look that way if you suddenly deprived her of, regular sleep, a good diet, and the ability to work out the way that she does. She would probably be closer to a soldier, right, who often do a lot of marching, rucking, calisthenics, running, because they, especially when they're out in the field, right, living in the barracks, and whatnot is different, but when they're out in the field, actually actively engaged in war, they don't have the luxury of sleeping 8 hours a night or, eating steak all day, right? They have to live on rations. They have to fear for their lives. So when you're living in suboptimal conditions, you're not gonna get as yoked as Abby does. And that's just one recent example, right? But what Melanie's video reminded me of is just this gaslighting of how, oh, gamers, male gamers, or people like me who would be considered like honorary bigots and have internalized misogyny. I'm a tomboy. It's not internalized misogyny. I'm just not terribly feminine. This dress aside. Hey, I grew up. But anyway, they would accuse someone like me of hating myself, or basically I would be considered an honorary bigot because I don't buy into this narrative, right? And this narrative for years has been, oh, gamers don't like strong female characters, gamers don't like strong women. And it's like, but most gamers, to my knowledge, are in their mid 30s, so we grew up with strong women depicted in video games. Like the first lady of fighting games is Chun Li, right? This strong, powerful, busty Chinese woman who's a cop. She's freaking Interpol, right? What do you mean that we don't like strong women, right? And again, there's Metroid, right? Again, Samus, a friggin' bounty hunter, right? A space bounty hunter who is feared by her enemies, and of course Tomb Raider and all these other games, right? So there's been this gaslighting that if you don't accept these, I would say, I don't want to say weaker because I don't think it's fair, but these female characters that I would say are more in line with maybe what the mainstream wants, right? Because Melanie brought up in her video how new Lara, sort of lives in the shadow of her father, right? Is following in his footsteps. She doesn't have as much agency in her story as original Lara did, right? The whole thing about original Lara was that she was a rebel, right? She left everything she ever knew, right? She got disowned by her family and went and did things on her own. And now new Lara is sort of tied and represented and forever connected to a man, whereas the original Lara was like, I don't need anybody. All I need is my skills, some money, and two Uzis, right? Or whatever type of gun it was. I think it was an Uzi. It was described in magazines as twin Uzis. But anyway, so there's been this narrative for the longest now that gamers hate strong women, and it's like, no, we don't. But we're so upset about is that you're taking our iconic strong women and you're taking what made them strong away from them, whether it's visually by making them less physically imposing. I mean, if you look at like old school Lara, right? Right, the way she was typically drawn in like official art and everything, right? She usually had these very muscular, fit arms, the big chest, right? Strong legs. She looked powerful. Now, new Lara does not look as physically powerful and intimidating. And I want to be clear, especially if you like new Lara, I'm not saying her design is bad. I'm just saying that her design visually is toned down. And from a visual narrative standpoint, right, the skinnier arms, not having as much of a physically impressive figure, right? Visually, that says something. It says that she's not as physically powerful. She doesn't look all that strong, right? It's like toning down like Power Girl or something, right? Power Girl looks like a friggin' like pro wrestler, right? The thick arms, right? The big chest, the thick legs, right? That is physical signs, physical visual signs of someone who works out and who trains with weights a lot. If you take that size away, right, you're gonna have a character who just looks very slim. Again, like take Supergirl and Power Girl. Supergirl and Power Girl, for those who are not familiar, basically alternate universe versions of each other. The same person, just with a different, not even different background, just like different circumstances, right? But anyway, Supergirl has this very slim, lithe cheerleader look, whereas Power Girl looks more like an old school, maybe like 80s, 90s pro professional wrestler. Think of like maybe Sable, but not as sexualized, right? But very muscular. right? Same thing, for example, with Carol Danvers, right? Back in old school comics, in particular, her solo run from '06 to '10, like the Frank Cho art. You know, she was blonde and had these thick legs and these muscular arms and all this stuff. She looked physically powerful. Then when she became Captain Marvel, they gave her this very, it was still very muscular, but this very slimmed down look. And it's just, at least in my opinion, it's just very visually jarring when you've been accustomed to someone looking a certain way, right? And especially when that way has been sort of physically powerful and imposing, and suddenly, you know, all of that mass is gone, and now it is uber slim. It's like it's not a bad design. I want to be clear. It's not a bad design. I'm not trying to hate on skinny or lithe people. It works with certain characters and certain designs, but for the characters I'm talking about, especially when they were visually noted for being bigger women, powerful, muscular women who still looked very feminine. When you do that, it's just very visually jarring, right? And in my opinion, it's just not a look that looks good for those type of comic book characters, right? For example, Sue Storm can be slim, that's fine. Carol Danvers, in my opinion, needs to look physically strong and powerful. She needs those tree trunk legs and those muscular arms, and the fact that she doesn't have them bugs me. But anyway, rant done. Let me get back to the point, especially since it's like 16 minutes into this video. But right, there's been this false narrative, right, told to us by media, whether it's comic media, whether it's regular media, whether it's Anita, whether it's oh goodness, games media like Polygon or Kotaku or everything that says that, you know, male gamers hate women, and we're trying to, you know, force these female characters, these powerful women. It's like, well, how powerful really are these women? Really, how powerful are they? When you've taken a powerful, iconic female character and now you make her daddy's little girl, really, how powerful have you made her? Somebody who broke the chains, right? That for her and lifestyle she wanted to live held her back. Now to one who was forever chained to the memory of her father. And of course, right, there's this whole thing that, like, you know, women don't need men. Yet you take a female character who was noted for being a rebel and leaving her entire past behind and make her forever chained to her dad, right? And this also reminds me of Battlefield 5, right? That game came out like 2 years ago, and there was controversy over the game having a female protagonist, and even looking up the information for this video, I came across old articles from Kotaku and from Polygon and Dice and all this other stuff, talking about how, you know, gamers didn't know their history, and there were women who fought in World War II, and the gamers are just being sexist. And it's like, no, no, that wasn't it. What fans were upset about was the fact that your female protagonist in Battlefield 5 was a woman fighting for the Allies. I think she's supposed to be British, and she's like disabled. It's like, that's not what the Brits did in World War II, right? Battlefield is supposed to be a game that's a bit more based in reality, right? When it comes to its depiction of war. And what gamers were upset about at the time was the fact that she was a lead character and the circumstances around it didn't make sense, right? The Allies had female spies. There was a spy organization, and women did that, and women were in supporting roles such as nurses, but they weren't frontline soldiers. That's not what was happening in England, right? During World War II in the mid 40s, right? And and they bring up, oh, there was Lady Death, the Russian sniper, real name Ludmila Pavlichenko. I probably said that wrong. If anybody's Russian or speaks Russian, please tell me how you actually say it. But here's the thing about Lady Death, as I'm going to refer to her as. She was Soviet. She fought for the Soviet Union. Battlefield, the Battlefield games, to my understanding, don't allow you to play as the Soviet Union. So unless they created an original character to sort of be her counterpart on the Allied side and created a reasonable scenario around it, yeah, you're not going to be playing, especially if the game is meant to be at least fairly historically accurate. Yeah, you're not going to be playing as a female soldier, right? In for the Allies, because the Allies didn't have them, right? If you wanted to put Lady Death or some sort of character equivalent in the game, which I think would have been fine. Right, I was looking at an old Appabend video, and there are several comments talking about basically, look, let me play as Lady Death, and I'll give you all of my money. People are talking about what about the Night Witches and all these different female warriors or warrior groups, but again, they all fought for the Soviets, right? It's like all gamers, at least from my understanding, all gamers really wanted from that game was just a scenario that made sense. And if that scenario included women in roles that made sense, right, they would have been fine. But having a female lead character with a disability, I think she's missing an arm or something, you're having her as a frontline soldier for the Allies during World War II. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. It's by no means historically accurate, and fans were right to be upset. But when fans brought this up, right, you had Oscar Gabrielson back in May of 2018 say that player choice and female characters are here to stay. Again, this is talking about Battlefield 2, and that they wanted, sorry, not Battlefield 2, Battlefield 5, but this was like over two years ago now. It's back in May of 2018. We want Battlefield 5 to represent all those who were part of the greatest drama in human history and give players choice. But did you give players choice? I don't see where you gave players choice. But anyway, it says give players choice to choose and customize the characters they play with. Our commitment as a studio is to do everything we can to create games that are inclusive and diverse. My man, war is not inclusive and diverse. Do you know the history of anything? Right, and there's all this other stuff, and then it's like everyone's Battlefield, and then there were comments made by the then Chief Creative Officer of Electronic Arts, Patrick Soderlund, right? And he said, apparently this was at an E3 interview with Gamasutra. How in the world does Gamasutra even exist in this like current climate, right? It's obviously a play on Kama Sutra, and the Kama Sutra is basically this ancient guide of like sex positions. So someone just tell me in this like hyper Puritan world how this website name still exists. But anyway, right? It says, and again, this is from like over 2 years ago, but it says on the women in Battlefield, this is something that the development team pushed. Soderlund said in an E3 interview with Gamasutra. Battlefield 5 is a lot about the unseen, the untold, the unplayed. The common perception is that there were no women in World War II. There were a ton of women who both fought in World War II and partook in the war. And they were Soviet! Unless you were going to be allowed to play as the female spies, the very few female spies that the Allies employed through England, through, what was it, the OSS and whatnot? Unless you were going to do that, no, having this female character never made sense. Right? And then Soderlund added, we felt like in today's world, I have a 13-year-old daughter, that when the trailer came out and she saw the flag, she asked me, Dad, why is this happening? She plays Fortnite, and I said, and it says, I can be a girl in Fortnite. Why are people so upset about this? And she looked at me and she couldn't understand it. And I'm like, okay, as a parent, how do I tell her? And it's like, you know what? You're right. This is not okay. And then, and here was the big part that like got people mad, gamers mad back then. These are people who are uneducated. They don't understand that this is a plausible scenario. And listen, this is a game. And today's gaming is gender diverse like it hasn't been be before. There are a lot of female people who want to play and male players who want to play as a badass woman. And I'm like, dude, what people were complaining about is the very thing you accused people of being. It wasn't about gamers being uneducated. It was about gamers actually knowing their military history and knowing that unless you allowed them to play on the Soviet side, you were not going to be playing as a female frontline soldier. And even for the Soviets, they did not employ women who were disabled and missing an arm. Right? That you can hear it in my voice, right? And this is the type of thing that drives me nuts. And it was happening in 2018, and it's happening now. It was happening in 2014. This continued gaslighting. Gamers, at least of a certain age, I think gamers in general, but especially gamers of a certain age, namely my age, mid-30s, right? We grew up with these badass women that Sutherland at the time was talking about. People want to play. We grew up with them. We grew up playing Samus and playing as Lara and playing as Chun Li and Cammy and Sonya and all these other female characters. What gamers are upset about is that you keep trying to take these characters away via writing them out or killing them or changing them, right? Or toning them down as they did in the Mortal Kombat games, or just completely ruining them via retcon like they did with Sindel. And again, we constantly get accused of being something collectively as a group. We get accused of being something that we're not. Right? Gamers are accused of being sexist, not liking strong women, and it's like, how many times do we have to say it? That was never the case. Gamers can be a hornet's nest. Gamers can be immature. We can be very reactive and reactionary. All fair and fine criticisms. But sexism is not it. And the funny thing is that the more you learn about the internal stuff within gaming studios, right, the crunch culture, the unhealthy work environment that was found in NetherRealm Studios, that was found in what is it? Several companies. NetherRealm, Naughty Dog, what was it? Activision or one of those companies got in trouble recently because of like sexual assault allegations or sexual misconduct or whatnot, right? And then of course other places like BioWare, Bungie, all this other stuff. It's like it's very similar to Hollywood, right? How there are scandals upon scandals upon scandals in Hollywood, but these scandals, right, are somehow, it's like two realities, right? It's like, okay, Harvey Weinstein is a perv and a jerk, right? But he was also a high-powered man in Hollywood. He did not live in a normal world, right? He didn't live in the world I live in. But it's like, okay, since men like Kevin Spacey and Matt Lauer and Harvey Weinstein, who again lived in Hollywood, in entertainment, in media, in TV, all other stuff, which is quite different from this thing we call reality. Welcome to the real world, right? Somehow, because they did bad, regular men who might have power, right? Your boss, the president of your company, or whatever, regular men are now seen as creeps in the same level of these guys. It's the same thing in gaming. It's like okay, there are a lot of issues in gaming companies, right? Amy Hennig, some say she was sort of forced out or made to leave Naughty Dog and whatnot. But there are a lot of issues in these gaming companies, and somehow these issues in these companies, right, somehow become this false narrative and false reflection and projection, honestly, onto gamers. Oh, because Naughty Dog has a problem retaining developers or retaining women, right, or pushing women out as some allege, right, or crunch culture and all this stuff, or because NetherRealm has crunch culture, right, or terrible writers who ruined female characters like Sindel. Yes, I'm talking to you, Dominic Cianciolo, and Sean Kittleson, but especially Cianciolo. Somehow, all that drama put onto us gamers, right? We are somehow held responsible for what these for what these people in these companies do. We somehow get held accountable for it. It's like, oh, they did it to please gamers, but they didn't. They didn't. These dramas wouldn't pop up if they were actually doing things that pleased gamers. If Battlefield 5 had put a gameplay scenario that featured a woman in a context that made sense, gamers wouldn't have complained. The problem was the shoehorning. And yet that somehow is, oh, gamers are sexist. It's like, no, gamers are intelligent and know when they're being lied to. It's like, oh, you don't like strong female women. Yes, that's why Fourth Snake lost his head video after video ranting about Sindel, because he hates women, right? Keep in mind, right, Sindel, especially if you don't play the Mortal Kombat games, she was sort of like the good queen, wife, mother. She took her own life out of grief because she was forced to marry a man she didn't love. She was resurrected and brainwashed, so she was introduced as an evil queen initially, and then it was revealed after she was rescued by her daughter that she was actually a good person after all, and the rest of her story throughout most of the Mortal Kombat games was that she would, with her daughter and her daughter's allies, she would fight to restore her world, right? So we had that for like 20 years, and then Cianciolo tries to turn Sindel into Lady Macbeth, but because gamers don't like it, we get accused of being sexist. Because he ruined a character we did like, we get called sexist. Because we actually know our history and know that women were not in World War II the way the game shows, we get called sexist, right? If you don't like Abby, then you're a sexist. If you don't like the new version of Tomb Raider, you're a sexist. If you don't like, say, Cassandra from what was it, Assassin's Creed, the Assassin's Creed game that takes place in ancient Greece, because she's a Spartan, and if you know anything about Greek culture or Spartan culture, you know that the Spartan women, while yes, they kept themselves in shape and they um, what's what I'm looking for? I guess you could say cheered their men into war, right? They they were a warrior culture, right? And so the women played a huge part in that, right? The women would tell the men when they went out to a war, they would give him the shield, and they would be like, "You either come back with this shield or on it," right? Meaning that you either come back with it or you're dead on it, right? Even a woman who say lost her son in battle, right? She would actually sort of like be praised because her son died in battle, so it was seen as a reflection on her. So they were a huge part of the warrior culture that existed at the time, but they didn't take up arms and fight. They didn't do that. So if you took exception to that and said, "Look, I don't like the character of Cassandra because she was a Spartan and Spartan women didn't go out to war," then it's, "You're a sexist," and it's that type of BS that I hate. It's like when you actually have a brain and you think and you know your history, and you point out, hey, yeah, this actually wouldn't work out the way that the game is trying to make it seem it would, then suddenly you are a sexist. And this has just been going on for like 7 years at least. And I know as myself as a gamer, right? I am just sick and tired of it. It's like, can these gaming studios just stop massaging their own ego, stop projecting their issues onto gamers, and just give gamers what they want? Because gamers want strong women. Gamers want powerful women. We grew up with them. What we don't want is what's been happening is that these iconic female characters have been taken from us in one way or another. And then when we get upset and we're like, hey, give us our Lara Croft back. And it's like, you sexist, misogynist pig, right? And male gamers, sadly, get the brunt of this because gaming is still male dominated, and even that's treated as a sexist issue. It's like, have you ever thought that maybe women just in general are not as attracted to gaming, at least hardcore gaming, right, than men are? Not everything is a social issue. Not every inequality or difference in life is a result of some sort of social ill, right? People have their own interests. A lot of men like games, or at least these types of games. Maybe there are some women like myself who like them also, but a lot of women don't, or they like different types of games. Right? There are so many explanations for the differences or the inequalities, especially when men tend to be the more plentiful group. And yet, instead of trying to understand these differences or like dig into it or try to figure out, okay, why do these differences exist? It's more of, okay, because there's a difference, and more importantly, because men, right, are the ones who are in the greater position. Because of this difference, there's a problem. Because think about it, no one complains about the prevalence of female nurses, right? Right, you can have all the female nurses in the world, no one cares. You have like one male nurse, no one cares. No one cries sexism with that, right? But you have more men in gaming in general than women, and suddenly it's sexism. And all this gaslighting just wears me out. And for those who don't know what gaslighting is, to my understanding, the name comes from a play from the 40s that became a film. But to make a long story short, gaslighting is a psychological thing that abusers tend to do. When it's basically a denial of reality, right? Say, for example, you leave a room, you turn off the light, right? Your abuser, when you don't see it, goes into the room, turns on the light. You come back into the room a moment later, you're like, hey, didn't I just turn off the light? And your abuser goes, oh, no, you didn't turn off the light. Your memory's messed up. You didn't turn off the light, right? And it's this constant denial of reality over and over and over again. Oftentimes from someone that you trust who is abusing you, right? So that you begin to believe what they say. And you start to doubt your own understanding and your own perception of reality, right? To the point where you don't trust yourself anymore. You don't trust how you see and perceive things. Because what if it's wrong, right? And I'm not for that. I'm not for basically trying to like induce dementia into people more or less, right? Just to get my way. And I want to be clear. If you like if you like The Last of Us and you like Abby, or you like the newer version of Tomb Raider, or you like Cassandra, or you liked Battlefield 5 and its female character, that's fine. I would disagree with those characters, but if you liked it, that's all well and good. We're all entitled to our tastes and our opinions. What frustrates me is how people who stated they didn't like these things for perfectly valid reasons, right? Valid, thought out critiques and reasons. Oh, and I should mention, this also goes to New Sindel. right? If you liked these type of characters, that's cool. I don't. And I have valid reasons, and many other people like me have valid reasons for not liking them. So it's like, I'm not going to shame you for liking something that I don't like. Please don't do the same to me, right? Don't do what Soderlund did, saying that, oh, gamers are uneducated. No, because the very problem was that gamers were educated. Gamers knew their history about World War II, and they knew that this particular female character in this particular set of circumstances, working for the Allies, did not exist. There were no frontline soldiers for the Allied forces. It's as simple as that. If they wanted to introduce a female character, allow you to play as the Soviets, and then you could play as the women in the Red Army, or as Lady Death, or as the Night Witches, or whatever it was. All we're asking for is to not be shamed and blamed when we dislike something on valid grounds. I don't think that's too much to ask, but respectful disagreement seems to be a lost art these days. So that's the video. I went on much longer than I thought I would, but it's a ramble, it's a rant. So please let me know what you think, and I will see you on the next one. Have a good day, night, evening, wherever you are. Stay safe. You take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.